Patrick Mahomes has quickly ascended to be one of the most respected, successful, and talented quarterbacks in the NFL, and now the Super Bowl MVP is handsomely paid for his efforts, recently signing a staggering deal for 10 years and a whopping $450 million, and with incentives, it could total a mind-boggling $503 million when all is said and done. With this being said, what's the next step Mahomes has to take in order to maximize his career potential? Harold Kuntz is a sports reporter for Fox 4 in Kansas City. He joined me this week to go over the numbers and the impact the contract will have on the Chiefs and the rest of the league. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. So, Harold, if you're ready, I will welcome you to the show, and we're excited to talk about Patrick Mahomes' new contract with you this afternoon. Thanks so much for being here.
Go for it.
So I'm just going to start you off by asking you what exactly was your initial reaction when you saw the number in terms of money and the number of years to the contract?
Well, Kansas City sure loves Patrick Mahomes, and when you give him a contract that's $477 million guaranteed with over $500 million, $503 million potentially in incentives, which I'm sure he'll hit some of those for getting to an AFC championship game or going to the Super Bowl or even winning Super Bowl MVP or having an MVP season. It's remarkable to know that an organization has entrusted their lead man for the next, now will be 12 years because he's already got 2 more years left on his contract. When you do a 10-year deal, that signifies that you're the guy. And Kansas City sure loves Patrick Mahomes. The organization does. One of the biggest things he wanted was this Andy Reid would stick around. That's the head coach for the Chiefs. And as long as Andy Reid stuck around, Patrick Mahomes is going to stick around. There's a lot of great players around him. And he also made the contract in a way that other players around him could get paid too. And we saw that with Chris Jones, the defensive tackle, getting $85 million 4-year contract as well. So it's a team-friendly contract. It's a contract that'll get Patrick Mahomes paid. We'll see how it works in the 4th, 5th, and 6th years where he really gets to bump up in significant salary. But for right now, it's a great day for anybody that is a Kansas City fan, and really a great day overall for the city to see the person that most people associate with Kansas City the most across the world is going to be the highest paid athlete in United States sports.
And can you tell me what concerns might you have with such a long-term contract? Because a 10-year contract in sports is a long time.
It is, and that's the way they've kind of made the contract, where at the first couple years he's not going to get paid too much against the salary cap. And of course, with COVID-19 going on, we don't know how the salary cap is going to be. Right now, it's right around just over $190 million for the salary cap for all the players with their base salaries. But as we go further, the salary cap could go up. There's new TV negotiations, and they're banking on those negotiations, leading in a lot of big money going forward for the NFL and for their teams and players. So they kind of worked a contract around that. And also, you do mention there could be some concerns, as I mentioned, 4, 5, 6 years down the road when he's going to be getting north of 20, 25, and even at one point $35 million toward the cap. That could be a significant concern, but by then there's going to be a lot of guys who are on veteran salaries that may be let go. After next year, even, there might be a lot of guys released because they have to make room for some of these guys' payments. And there's also other players down the road who need to get paid too, notably safety Tyrann Mathieu, who is named the MVP of the team. He has to get a new contract after next season. So there's plenty to look forward to, but Brett Veach, who's the general manager of the Chiefs, and his staff, they've definitely crunched the numbers on this, and their numbers seem to be working right now. Their math is pretty incredible to watch, quite frankly. So going forward, we'll see how they do with rookie contracts and hope that some of these moves that they made in the draft push forward in a good way for them.
Yeah, math wasn't my strong suit in school, but if I ever need a loan or a bill paid, I'll hit up Patrick Mahomes for sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
So when we look at the contract itself, what do you think it does for setting precedents for the rest of the league in terms of quarterback contracts moving forward?
It's a huge precedent setter, really. You think of two quarterbacks right now, Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys and Deshaun Watson of the Houston Texans. They're both going to have contract negotiations, and certainly their camps, but their agents and people around them have definitely noticed when you see the number $503 million pop up. They want some of that too, and they think they have the credentials as too. Deshaun Watson can even say that he's had a win against Patrick Mahomes. Not in the most important game of the season, but he definitely beat them in the regular season. And Dak Prescott has also put up some quality numbers as well for the Dallas Cowboys. So it's going to be interesting going forward. But one thing that was really made a big difference was Brett Veach, again, the general manager, said that they're going to have to do a baseball-like contract for Patrick Mahomes. And I think going forward for quarterbacks especially, that might be something that other general managers at the other 31 NFL ball clubs are going to have to take into account, because quarterbacks are the franchise players right now, especially the way the NFL is designed. It's a quarterback-driven league, and those guys are your faces. And with that contract, it comes a lot of money that's going to be involved for the best quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes obviously is a Super Bowl winning quarterback, a Super Bowl MVP, and MVP the season before. Lamar Jackson won it the previous year. And even Lamar Jackson, he's another one. He's on a rookie salary. And if he were to end up winning a Super Bowl too, he and his camp can definitely go back and demand even more money, simply because he would have been an MVP and then the Super Bowl MVP. So there's a lot on the line here, and that's a big number setter. I'm not sure necessarily how it will go in terms of the years, but for the number, it's a huge precedent setter, and that puts football ahead of baseball when it comes to making contracts.
And prior to last season, as you know very well, Kansas City was under a 50-year Super Bowl drought. So can you just tell me what Patrick Mahomes means to Kansas City? And I'm sure since he won the Super Bowl, he could sort of walk on water and be endeared to the city of Kansas City for a long time. Would you agree with that?
Well, you said walk on water, and I think Patrick Mahomes has done everything in this city except walk on water, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did, and I'm sure some fans would not be surprised if he did that either so far, at least with his play at Arrowhead Stadium. He means a lot to this community, not just on the field with his play, but off the field too, with 15 of the Mahomies, his charity that he runs with helping kids in the city and to help improve their lives. And not just him, but all the Chiefs do too. I mean, notably, Tyrann Mathieu does a lot with his foundation, and a few others as well. Mitchell Schwartz has done a lot of community, the offensive tackle for the team. So there's a lot done in this community, but Patrick Mahomes, I mean, the number 15 jersey here is like the most favorite Christmas present for any kid in this city. And I think we're seeing his name not just here in the Chiefs Kingdom, as they call it, but also nationally as well. His voice is really grown. And we saw that earlier this year when he was the face, really, of the Black Lives Matter video that the NFL players put out. He was the one that did say Black Lives Matter first, and his voice carries a lot of weight. He had conversations with the NFL commissioner, Roger Goodell, and he's had conversations that going forward, things that he feels that are important for himself as a young black man in his community that he needs to push forward along with a group of players too. And we're seeing his voice being heard even today as we speak. They're having a big Twitter rally, if you will, over social media, basically encouraging the NFL to have safety procedures in place for what is an ongoing pandemic. So he has a big voice in the community. He has a big voice nationally. I think that is growing. We're seeing him playing in celebrity golf tournaments. We're seeing him have more and more sponsorships involved. He's sponsored by a grocery store here in Hy-Vee. He's also sponsored by a government insurance agency here in GEHA. So Oakley Shades is another sponsor. And that's just to name a few. So he's a big name around here. He always will be a big name around here. And the fact that he's won a Super Bowl for this city in the first time in 50 years, you go back to the greats like Lynn Dawson and Bobby Bell and those guys. I mean, he's on the pedestal of one of the greatest athletes to ever play in this city already, and he's still got plenty of more years to grow. So he's just short of a deity in this city, really. You don't put anybody up there at the level of God, obviously, but some people do think of him as a guy who is, put it this way, he'd win mayor pretty easily right now, even though there's a pretty good mayor in this city already. He'd probably win pretty easily.
Yeah, I'm sure. Now, from a diversity standpoint, what does Patrick Mahomes' ascension mean for the diversity perspective of the NFL in terms of promoting diversity around the league? Certainly, also with the current climate and culture we're living in. How do you think his fame and fortune can help in that regard as well?
Well, I alluded to the Black Lives Matter video that the NFL players posted, which was basically in response to Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner's perceived weak response to everything that was going on with the protests here in the United States, and I'm sure across the world as well. So we saw him put his face forward in that. And also, I think that you look at the NFL now, look at some of your best quarterbacks, they're all players of color. I mentioned Dak Prescott earlier and Deshaun Watson, and also there's Lamar Jackson. I mean, you look at those four quarterbacks, obviously, and then Russell Wilson to the Seattle Seahawks. You look at those five quarterbacks, those are five of the best quarterbacks in the league, and they're all players of color. So I think it's an opposite of thinking from when even maybe 5 to 10 years ago, when you had everybody thinking that in order to play a quarterback, well, you had to have a certain mindset, or you couldn't just run the football all the time. That perception's changing. And a lot of that has to do with good coaching here in Kansas City with Andy Reid and his staff. Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator, who is also an African-American gentleman as well. And he's looking for a chance to get a head coaching job sometime. You could argue that he could have been a head coach already. And, other NFL teams have seemed to gone the other way, but I feel that his chance is coming potentially after the end of this season. So I think the voices are changing. I think they realize that black quarterbacks are here to stay, and they're very good. And Patrick Mahomes just happens to be the leader of that right now, but I feel like there's a generation after him that's coming as well. And there's also a generation now that's doing very well, and they're all young, and they're here to stay in the NFL. And Patrick Mahomes is just the guy that's leading that group.
Now, in terms of the contract itself, again, does that, in your opinion, elevate the expectations for Mahomes and the Chiefs?
It does. I mean, if you pay somebody nearly or really over $500 million, the expectations do go up. Now, Patrick Mahomes said himself that he feels like he's the same person, and he feels that he always has high expectations whenever he goes onto the field, which is honestly what any player is supposed to say. But from a public perception and a fan perception, yeah, it definitely means that you would like to see at least 2 more Super Bowls out of Patrick Mahomes going forward, and you'd like to see a couple more MVP seasons. Now, will he ever get to the numbers that he had in his first full year of playing, where he had 50 touchdowns and over 5,000 yards passing? Maybe, maybe not. He fell well short of that. Obviously, he was injured and out for 2 games. Matt Moore, the backup, came in in the Green Bay and Minnesota games. But in 14 games, he still had 35 touchdowns and over 3,500 yards throwing. So, and most importantly, even though he threw a couple interceptions in the Super Bowl, the Chiefs still came out on top. So going forward, it's definitely a big thing that he does, continue the winning thing, but he wants to build a dynasty. He's repeated that over and over. He wants to build a dynasty. He wants to create a legacy here in Kansas City. In order to do that, you have to win multiple Super Bowls. He says he wants to catch up to Tom Brady. Well, Tom Brady has 6, and Patrick Mahomes has 1. So a lot of work to do in that category. We shall see what happens going forward with him, but at least by contract, he's got 12 more years to do that. So with the pieces in place and the general management and staff that he has with him right now with the organization, which is one of the better run organizations in the National Football League, Patrick Mahomes definitely has the opportunity to do that. Now he just has to live up to those expectations, large expectations, but so far with the trajectory he's on, expectations he can match.
I've got a couple of more questions for you. The first one is going back to Eric Bieniemy. Certainly he's proven his worth as an assistant coach, and besides Ron Rivera, who was the only minority head coach hired in this round of cycle hiring for coaches. So I'm just wondering your perspective on the work that the NFL still needs to do in promoting minority hirings in both head coaching ranks and in management ranks as well.
Well, you see the Miami Dolphins and the LA Chargers also have coaches of color as well, along with Ron Rivera. And Ron Rivera obviously had been a coach with the Carolina Panthers before he now has the job in Washington. So Eric Bieniemy is definitely going to be on that list. I honestly feel he should have had a job this past offseason, but other teams have decided to go other ways in the last couple years. The New York Giants have, the New York Jets have, the Cleveland Browns have, among a few others. And it's only 32 jobs. It's a hard job to get in the NFL to be a head coach. And I think one of the things that needs to happen is the owners need to really start being on the same, trajectory with these guys and start talking to them more often. I think they've started to try to do that with the QB coaching summit and a couple other summits. And maybe some of these owners need to get out there and talk to them and realize that they would be good leaders of men on the football field and also good leaders for their community as well. And I think that's the biggest thing when you're basically the main spokesperson for the team, that they want to see somebody who can speak well. And Eric Bieniemy, I think, crosses off all those boxes. He checks every list as a head coach. He's obviously worked under Andy Reid, who's a future Hall of Famer. Andy Reid already has 2 assistants prior to him, and Doug Peterson, who's a Super Bowl winning champion coach with the Philadelphia Eagles, and also Matt Nagy, who had the Bears make a great run the year prior to this past season in the playoffs. So Eric Bieniemy, as I said, checks off every box on the list. He's also a good man too, good family man. Has been in the game around football for a long time. He played at the University of Colorado as a running back. He's got all the tools to succeed. I think it's just only a matter of time. And I think these NFL coaches and NFL teams really just need to wake up and make a quality hire for an assistant coach of a quarterback who's the best in the league right now. Who wouldn't want that on their team? I would ask the NFL teams. And I think Eric Bieniemy's right there.
And obviously, the relationship between a coach and a quarterback is an important ingredient for success in football. And Mahomes and Andy Reid could teach a masterclass on the subject. So I concluded the interview by asking Kuntz to shed some light on the incredible synergy the two men share and whether or not he believes we'll have football which starts on time under these COVID-19 conditions.
Well, to answer your first question, I think the relationship between Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, Andy Reid feels like a little kid now. This is a guy that's in his younger 60s, will be into his mid-70s by the time that 12-year with the 10-year extension of Mahomes' contract ends. And he thinks he's still going to be around. I think that Andy Reid loves to design what he likes to call pat plays. and we'll see some of those. It's going to be new ways to tinker with the offense. They've got an exciting offense around them with wide receivers in Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins and Demarcus Robinson, a great tight end in Travis Kelce, and running back group that's large with depth, kind of future with Damian Williams and the rookie they picked up in the draft, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So a lot of weapons, a good returning offensive line too, which is just as important, anchored by Mitchell Schwartz. So a lot of good pieces to the puzzle. And Andy Reid just kind of comes in and he loves those guys. He mentioned Patrick Mahomes and Tyrann Mathieu, two guys he just loves being around, loves designing something. And an interesting story here that I found out one time when Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid were going through a play design. Andy Reid drew up a play. Patrick Mahomes looked at it on the field, and at the same time, both of them said the word isosceles together, as if it was an isosceles triangle. So they're both thinking on the same wavelength, and I believe that Patrick Mahomes going back and saying, "Hey, Andy, how long are you going to be around?" And he said, "I'm around as long as you're around." When that happens, you know those guys are in sync. And one of the biggest things about the National Football League is when your general management and Brett Veach, head coach and Andy Reid, and your quarterback are all on the same page, you've got a real shot to win. And those three guys are there kind of forming their quote-unquote isosceles triangle, and those guys are together and going to win. Now, to your latter question about if we'll have a football season, well, no one knows right now. I believe we will have football in some way, shape, or form. It may not be on time. It may be on time, but we will have football. I do believe that the insatiable appetite of this country for football will stand the test of time. May not be on time, but we'll have some football. And right now they're trying to work on some safety measures in place dealing with the pandemic. Players are trying to make sure that they are, healthy when they go out to practice. They have protocols in place. It's going to be a lot different. It's going to be a lot different for people like us in the media to kind of watch as well. So we're in a wait and see mode right now. Training camp is scheduled to start July 28th, according to the collective bargaining agreement between the players and the owners. Teams can, submit a fine to players, if you will, if they do not show up on time. But at the same time, players can file grievances as well. So there's a lot to determine. It seems like they had a lot of time to determine this, and they're just getting to it now. But you kind of see how the way things work in America. A lot of times, things are kind of determined at the last minute here. As you might suspect, we're not nearly as organized as you guys up in North in Windsor, Canada there. So we're trying. And I'm sure there's a lot of other things in place. There's a lot of things outside of their control that they haven't dealt with. But I will say that there will be football. We just have no idea when and where, but there's going to be football. Fans are going to be very limited. I would imagine the Chiefs have already made plans for limited fan attendance already. Some teams have come out and said there's going to be no fans at all. So it's going to be an interesting season. It's going to be a season like we've never seen before in this country, for sure.
Hey, Harold, I want to take a few seconds to thank you for your insight and perspective. We enjoyed it very much, and hopefully we'll come up with an 11th-hour decision and solution so that we can all enjoy football this fall. I want to thank you for your time and your efforts this afternoon.
Kevin, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.